Hello all the crazy people out there, my name is Michael, I like wizards and dragons and making games, and welcome back to Getting Started Making Games in GameMaker. So in the last couple of videos I have talked about drawing sprites, I have talked about drawing basic shapes, rectangles, circles, etc., and also drawing text. And those are all fairly important parts of making games, but there's one glaring omission that I've just sort of not discussed when it comes to any of them, and that is the fact that in all the demos that I've done so far, the text or the shapes or whatever that we've drawn have all been drawn relative to either the player's position in the world. So for example, this text is floating above the player's head and it is being drawn at a position relative to the player, or at a fixed position in the game world, and it will just stay at that position in the game world regardless of where the player is or where the game camera is following the player around or anything like that. And what we don't have a way to do so far is to draw any of those elements just fixed at a fixed position in the game window, so relative to the game window rather than relative to the game world. And that is where GameMaker's Draw GUI event comes in. So GUI stands for GUI, Graphical User Interface. Yes, laugh, it sounds hilarious when you say it out loud objectively. Just get that out of your system now. So, because GameMaker likes to make my life complicated, I think I probably should also say in this video, I am going to talk about the Draw GUI event. I am not going to talk about the newer system of user interface layers, which has been added to GameMaker about maybe a year or so ago. I'm sure I will make videos discussing the user interface layer system eventually, but one, they are a lot more complicated and they require quite a bit more setup and able to use effectively, as opposed to the Draw GUI event, which kind of only does one thing and does it very well. And also, the new user interface layers, unfortunately, have, let's say, some shortcomings, which make them a little bit aggravating to use sometimes. So, for this video, we will be sticking with the side of simplicity, and we will just be talking about the Draw GUI event. So the Draw GUI event is intended to solve this problem, and I'm going to just go to the player over here. The Draw GUI event is a type of draw event, so if I were to go to add an event, Draw GUI is going to be right underneath the regular draw event, and the Draw GUI event is going to have some particularly important properties. One of them is that it is going to draw after all the objects in the game have already run their regular draw events, so anything like the Draw GUI event will never, or the regular draw event I should say, will never draw over something that has a Draw GUI event, unless you somehow find a way to break GameMaker really badly, which I have done before. Anyway, the other very useful property of the Draw GUI event is that it will, by default, ignore any scaling or zooming or any transformations that you do to the actual camera viewport in your game. So, if you have, as in this example, a camera viewport that is zoomed all the way in, and that focuses on the player, this is something that is fairly common to do in pixel art games. Instead of any drawn text being drawn scaled up in accordance with the game camera, any text or anything else that you draw in the Draw GUI event will be just drawn at a 1-to-1 scale with the pixel grid of your monitor. Unless you choose to change that through code, which we will look at later in the video. And this is useful for all kinds of things. So, obviously, if you have something like a pixel art game, and if you want to have your in-game camera zoomed way in on the player, you might or might not want the user interface elements to draw at full resolution. Some people also like really crunchy user interface elements. I am not one of those people. I would rather have the UI draw at a 1-to-1 resolution. It also allows you to do things like if you have players who want to play your game at different window sizes or on monitors of different resolutions, you don't really have to do anything special or unusual in order to get your user interface elements to scale with the user's screen size, whether you're running your game at like full HD 1080p or small HD 720p or like something bigger than that, 1440p or 4K or beyond. The Draw GUI event will take care of scaling and display sizes and things like that for you, so that you shouldn't have to worry about scaling objects on your UI layer yourself. So let's talk about how we can do things with this. So I'm going to take the text that was drawn inside the regular draw event floating over the player's head. I am going to cut and paste that into the Draw GUI event. I'm also going to get rid of that red circle because I don't think it's necessary anymore. And now instead of drawing this text relative to the player's position, I'm just going to draw at a fixed position in the room, 32, 32. That will correspond to the upper left of the screen, of the window. Because in computer graphics, the 0, 0 point is generally the upper left. And if I run the game now, we are going to see that, one, I have forgotten to change the font alignment, but two, it is, this text is being drawn in the upper left, and it is anchored to the upper left no matter where the player goes, or no matter where the camera goes, or anything like that. Let us change this H align to FA underscore left, and let us change this V align to FA underscore top, and, that's gonna look a lot better. So we've now got text being drawn in this corner. And, you can draw anything you want here. You can draw sprites, you can draw text. Text is obviously common. Things like player health bars are things that you probably would want to draw on the user interface layer. Things like text, if you talk to an NPC and have them talk to you, then you might want to draw the text box on the user interface layer. I have gone and added this really bad MS Paint heart shape to this project, and that took me all like 5 seconds to make. But if you want to do something that approximates like a health bar or something, let's comment all this out. I'll come back to it later, I think. I can say draw sprite SPR health subimage 0 at a position on screen, and that is going to draw that health there. Let's imagine that the player has like 10 health for our I equals 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus. We can draw a sequence of 10 hearts at the top of the screen now. I did not mean to run that in the debugger. That's okay. Now the player has a lot of health, so can take some knocks before the game is over. Let's imagine that you, if you just want to draw something in the upper left of the screen, you can just pretty much type in its coordinates as is, and it will draw relative to the upper left of the screen, relative to the world origin, or to the screen origin anyway. If you wanted to draw something on the opposite end of the screen, the way you might do that is that, so in this example, in this test project here, my game world, my game window is going to be, it's going to have dimensions of 1280 by 720, so that used to be considered standard HD. Now most people would consider that fairly small, but you could type in this draw text function, let's set the text alignment back to FA right. You could type in something like 1280 minus 32, and that will cause the text to be drawn relative to the upper right of the screen instead of the upper left. And that's fine, but now if you try to do something like change the screen size to like 1600 by 720 or 1600 900 or so, which is like half of full HD, I guess. I mean, it's like halfway between, never mind. The point is that when we've done that, the text on our GUI layer is now kind of floating in the middle of the screen, and it is no longer anchored to the top right. And what you want to do generally, if you want to anchor user interface elements to some other point on the screen, is that instead of hard coding the screen width and height, there are a pair of functions: display, get, GUI, width, and I bet you can't guess what the other one is called. And this will return the width and height of the GUI in pixels. Oftentimes that will just be the size of the game window, but we'll see examples where that might not be the case later. But now when I do this, it doesn't matter what the size of my game window is, so 1600 pixels wide or 1280 pixels wide, or if you wanted some other screen resolution. The text is now always going to be drawn relative to the right side of the screen. So the width of the GUI minus 32, and then font alignment FA underscore right. If you wanted to make this really extreme, I don't know if 960 by 720 is a resolution that anybody ever actually uses, but if you squish it down this far, it's still gonna work. And yes, the other function that goes with it, if you guessed it was called display get GUI height, then that is correct. So honorary mention to window get width and window get height. These two functions don't directly have anything to do with the GUI. Like I said, oftentimes the width and height of the game window will correspond to the width and height of the actual GUI itself, unless you do anything that changes the resolution that the GUI is drawn at. Sometimes you will see people erroneously using window get width and window get height interchangeably with display get GUI width and height, and oftentimes you just can get away with it, but do be aware that there is a distinction. Alright, so now that I have gone and added that little footnote, let's actually talk about scaling the user interface layers to different sizes. So, there is a function which is display set GUI maximize, and this is a function which will allow you to set the scaling and also, if you want, the offset of the GUI layer. And I think what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna say display set GUI maximize with a width and with a X scale and a Y scale of 2, and I will conditionally, if I'm hitting the space bar on the keyboard, if keyboard check vk underscore space. So if you hold the space bar, we will set the GUI scale to 2, and if you release the spacebar, we will set the GUI scale back to the original, back to 1. If you want to just reset the GUI scaling to 1 on the X and 1 on the Y, you can set the, you can just call this function without arguments. The X and Y arguments are optional, and it will reset it for you, or you can explicitly tell it to set the scale to 1, 1. So if I run the game now, we can see that we've got the user interface elements being drawn like this. If I hit the spacebar, they are going to blow up a little bit, and they're going to start swimming together because there's not a lot of space on screen, and they're now both being scaled up 2x. So note that I didn't have to do anything else in order to keep things being drawn in the same relative locations, no matter what the GUI scale is. So even though I scaled it up, display get GUI width and the corresponding display get GUI height function automatically accommodate for that. And you won't have to do anything annoying like dividing this value by 2 or dividing it by some other number or multiplying it by some other number if you want to scale the GUI up or down. This function, in this case, the display get GUI width and height functions will not return the same value as window get width or window get height. What we can also do, and this is going to be the third and fourth arguments to the display set GUI maximize function, we can also set some horizontal and vertical offset values to the GUI if you want to translate it in space rather than scaling it. And if I do this, if I hit the spacebar, we can see that the user interface is going to be shifted some distance over from its original position. And this is probably useful less often than setting the scale of the GUI. But if you want to do things like, especially if you have a game which, if you want to accommodate for players who have ultra-wide monitors, but you don't want the entire game window itself to be, like, stretched out and to have some user interface elements, like, all the way on one side and other user interface elements all on the other side, then you might want to use the offset here, the offset values here, to position the GUI in the center of the game window so that, like, the player doesn't have to, like, turn their head all the way in order to see their health bar. And likewise, probably the main use for the GUI scale that I can think of, aside from aesthetic purposes, if you just want a chunky pixelated user interface, would be if, for example, if a player is playing at an extremely high resolution and you don't want all the user interface elements to be tiny, so at like 4K, 3840 by 2160, if you wanted a 1080p user interface, and if you wanted the text on the screen to be legible without being like really tiny, you might want to use display set GUI maximize to zoom in the user interface a little bit in that case, but that's for you to decide. Anyway, that's all there really is to the Draw GUI event. This is not a complicated event. Like I said at the beginning, it does one thing and it does it very well. So I think I'm going to end this off here. So let's go back to a regular screen size. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. If you want the code for this little demo, look for the GitHub repository down in the description of this video. I like to post videos on all kinds of stuff you can do in GameMaker, so if you're interested in anything like this, feel free to subscribe. I do like to post videos on both beginner things like this and also more complicated things, shader stuff, 3D stuff, stuff like that. I have a Patreon, so if you'd like to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places, and if you felt like pledging, I definitely would appreciate it. You should all go check out Wizarducks and the Lost Hat, which is one of the games that I like to work on when I'm not doing YouTube stuff. Link to that Steam page can be found down below as well. I hope you all found that useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, Zach Robinson, Squarecrow, Spy Games, Pixelated Pope, Paradox, Nykotic, Manta Ray, GameMaker, GameArt Indie, Edward Holt, DJ Gibbles, Bokeh Dev, and Argo the Knot for supporting these videos. If you want to join their ranks and contribute to the channel, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.